All right, everybody, we'll get started. So I'm Bill Hiatt. I work for Central Platte NRD out of Grand Island, a couple hours east of here. So we had something lucky happen this spring. So, you heard the whole talk about how bad our wildfire season was, and what's kind of funny is the part that burned here in the wildfire was the only part of this property we weren't going to burn this year. So this is just to give you a little idea of where it is. So here's Grand Island. Sorry, it's kind of fuzzy. So here's Grand Island. Here's Caro. Here's Highway 2. So it's a big flood cell that we use for impounding water, and then the rest of the time it is a wetland, and we manage it for wildlife. So I'm going to go over the prescribed burn first. One of the biggest things I wanted to get done with this was after, with it being flooded all the time, there's a lot of cattails. And I wanted to burn it in the spring, but it's just too wet. Maybe in the future, if we can get some better lines, we'll try it again in the spring where we don't have to drive through the wetland. But this was one big concern to me, was there was 7 years of heavy cattail growth there. Some areas were so thick, nothing was growing. It was a dead area. So you can see we did it kind of mid-fall, fairly even weather for the day. But one thing leading up to it, we had 160% of normal precipitation, so we had a lot of vegetation growth. So here's the actual map. So if you saw before, it was 350 acres. We ended up cutting this off. I was the burn boss, so I decided we kind of lost our wind towards the end and our smoke dispersion. And so we had cut this off during the main fire, and we were going to come back to it, but it was a little too late, and I didn't want to fog out the whole area for the night. So here's a video. So this is on the eastern side of that burn unit. So it's a much more diverse, typical wetland fuel. You can see it's active fire, but it is not. I guess it doesn't want to replay. So this is into the western. This is into the western side of it. You can see we have a nice big patch of Phragmites right up front, and then this is just cattails. So these videos, keep in mind for later when I talk about the wildfire, because if we hadn't done this burn, the wildfire would have been in these fuels. So this is towards the end of that burn. So like I said, we lost the wind towards the end of it, and there was enough fuel out there that with the loss of the wind, we got a convection-driven head fire, and so that's heading towards our unburned line. So we had to hurry up at the end and get ahead of it, which we did. We also had, 150 cars driving by at that time, so that was good. All right, so on to the wildfires. So this is the one I'll be talking about most. It happened first, but on that day we had north winds and pushed it, or north-northwest, and it pushed it straight into our burn. And then a little later on we had a ditch light on fire, and it just happened to be west winds that day, so that also burned it straight into our fire. So you think about it, those videos of our actual burn, think about trying to fight that, especially in a wetland where I don't know, you were guaranteed to any kind of truck you put in there would be stuck immediately. So this North Pile fire, like I said, this wasn't an area we planned to burn for a couple years. We wanted to let it rest after haying. So, I based this off of some game camera pictures. We think it started around then. That's the first time we picked up smoke. But you can see the temperature really wasn't that crazy. Humidity wasn't, but the wind was very strong. And so after our burn, we only got 50% of our normal precipitation. So pretty dry, ready to burn. So I have a couple videos from wildlife cameras. The first video, and these are, we just leave these out here throughout the year monitoring wildlife and sometimes vegetation growth. But so they're kind of time lapse, so they're kind of choppy. But so you can see the wind that was out of the northwest, so for a little while it was just flanking fire, and then it came on really strong. And honestly, like I said, we got really lucky because I don't know how this camera didn't get destroyed because it was only this high on a tree. But you can see, it consumed everything very quickly, and actually these cedars that are there, they're now dead. It baked them enough. And so this is that second one a little bit farther on a trail. And this was the start of this was the first smoke we picked up. So you can see it came through on one side, and I'll point out when we get to the whole picture where I think the fire started. And then it comes through on the other side. And so this is just a trail we maintain. So, with the weather conditions, that packed down trail didn't burn at all, but everything else did. So, and like I said, we got lucky. So we had a lot of pictures of it. A guy from Southern Public Power just happened to be there, and he put up a drone, sent us the pictures. So I think the fire started like somewhere out here, because when I showed up, it was about halfway through the trees, and this ditch was burned to about here. But I could never find an actual ignition source. I think it was more than likely chains dragging on the ground, because when it's that dry, it doesn't take much to get stuff going. And so that's what we kind of dealt with. This area of trees was kind of a mess, and a lot of old ones. We had all these ash trees and old elms and stuff that chimneyed for days. And that's kind of what it typically looked like in the understory. And just picture it with, that tall of grass too, before the fire. So like I said, we were lucky. We didn't know this was coming. We didn't really plan on it, but like I said, one of my concerns and the reasons we did the burn was that the fuel loading in that area was getting so high, it would be impossible to stop a fire. And so we had 7 different departments come out, and they handled the initial stuff, and then me and 3 other NRD staff spent a couple days dropping trees. The second day, the day after this, we just let trees burn out because the wind came out of the south the next day, just about as strong, so there was stuff falling all over. It was a little too dangerous, I thought, and it wasn't going to go anywhere. So, but you can see, so we still had our mowed lines from our burn established, and you can see where the wind was the strongest, so the trees are a little bit thicker over here, broke up the wind more. This was a little bit more open, but so you can see it did push it across our mow line. But I mean, that's flames that tall. So it was pretty easy, pretty safe for firefighters to get in there and fight it. So I just wanted to share some overall observations these are just my personal ones. So really, you're not stopping wildfire. Really so after a burn, you're going to encourage fine fuels, which is the easiest to burn. So in a way, you're encouraging fire, which in the long run is a good thing. But that's something to keep in mind. It will be easier to deal with and less dangerous right in front of you, but you're more taming it down rather than totally preventing it. The only total prevention, like in our case study here, was until the next growing season, until something comes back. And then at the end of that growing season, that stuff's dry, it's ready to burn again. So it'll slowly come back. I may see an increase in weeds. So a lot of people consider like sunflowers weeds. You'll get those early successional plants coming back on bare ground. Maybe more thistles and that kind of thing. Just opening up the ground to it. Am I good on time? Okay.
7 minutes.
Okay. So as you go down, and so I made up these observations like you go and burn a place, but then you do nothing else afterwards, like some people have touched on in their presentations. And so you're gonna just slowly return back to the exact same problems you had before if you don't do anything. But like you can delay the return of 10-hour and 100-hour fuels by follow-up, spraying or chopping. But the times that I get nervous is when you start seeing this. When your fine fuels are so thick, nothing new can grow through it. Just due to lack of sunlight. And so that tells me that area is at a dangerous condition for explosive fire growth. So I enjoy doing prescribed fire more. I have a history with wildfire fighting. And so those old learned lessons in my head always pop up. So that's something you can look at around your house. You can look around, around your town and kind of identify those scary areas. But it's more, if you're out there talking to your neighbors and you talk about, well, we just made a fire break. It's not completely true. Like Fullendorf said last night, it's messy. So you're having flashier, quicker burning fuels there, but it's easier to control. So if you're talking to somebody about it, you want to manage their expectations that you're not fireproofing anything. You're just making it a little bit safer. So that's the end. If you have any questions. All right. Well,
I have a question.
Yeah.
What are the fuels around the place that you burnt? Like, if you had happened to have not burnt the last fall, and it would have been a wildfire through that wetland, would it have been something that the landscape surrounding it?
So that's one picture. Well, actually, where I put the property could be a good one. Oh. Okay, so this is the actual property. So here's a backup flood cell, a little more capacity. So that's partially filled with cattails, not as bad as this one was, but still a lot of heavy fuel. This is Army ground, or former Army ground, that is fenced, and it's overgrown. Nobody does anything with it. We have permission to go on there and spray thistles just to prevent them from coming onto us. But other than that, it's completely left alone. A lot of dead zones out there. This is another pile. This is another piece of the cell. So this is our south burn line. So the Corps of Engineers wants us, before we do anything out here, to monitor this for 7 years. So if this fire had gotten, even our prescribed fire had gotten through here, that clock would have reset. So, like I said, in the future, we'll be able to just burn on the berms of this whole thing. So maybe in the spring, even if it's wet, we can still, use the heat to kill off cattails and set them back more. But like I said, this part, since we could burn it, I just wanted to get more rid of the fuel and try to get a little more diversity going. This is an alfalfa field that's irrigated, and then this is another pile, as we call them. They're kind of shaped like hills, but that's heavy mixed grass also. So really, if it had gotten into this cell, I would have recommended we stop it here. We just let it go until it's a safe place for us. Like I said, you put a truck in there, it's going to get buried and somebody's going to die. So
you said it started off with Airport Road, everything on?
Yeah, so about right here, I believe. That's my best guess. Yeah.
So if you had significant areas of dead zone, how would you go about managing that for a wildfire?
Say it's like right now you couldn't burn. What I would probably do is get a mower and open it back up, get some fresh growth in there. So we also have this property on a hay fire rotation. My bosses won't let somebody out there to graze. They don't want to deal with the infrastructure of it. So we use hay. So this is a relatively new thing. We just finished building it, and so what I'd like to do in the areas that we can, like this is probably our best area. It's bigger. It has quite an array of things, so this is more army ground that they won't sell to us, but it's full of trees. And so actually I see a lot of quail right in this area. So it's actually, I don't know, to me that means we're managing our grassland pretty well, that they want to be there and they still have that good mix around. And so with dead zones, really just getting that open back up is a big thing. I'd say burn it as soon as you can. If you can't, try to break up that thatch the best you can, because over time, with snow or wind, that thatch will disappear once you cut it. Any others? All right, thank you guys.